sitting in, so thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, you're
Yeah.
looking forward to it. We'll ask you at the end. No, that's fine.
Well, then I would have looked forward to it.
Yes, no, I think it's going to be an interesting day. Representative Seibert is out, and Representative Droege is out. Before we get started, I want to just lay a little groundwork here. Appropriations need this room at 5 o'clock. So we will move as quickly and judiciously as possible. But before we get started, if you were here last year, you're going to hear the same speech. I'm going to give a quick brief of what the process is. There are things that have been out on social media. I will tell you this first. This committee and me as chairman do not legislate by social media. My office received phone calls that I was going to do something that I do not have the authority to do. You want to make your case? Learn the process. The process is this. The bill was introduced in this committee. It was assigned back to this committee to work. Me and my team, made up of leadership, decided when this hearing would be held. If, after this hearing, we choose to work it, it would then be up to leadership to see if it hits the floor of the House to be discussed as the committee of the whole. If it is successful in passage, it will go to the Senate and start all over again. That is the process. Simply saying the word conservation does not make it law. I'm usually an easygoing guy, but I will tell you, I do not take kindly to bullying on the internet. I'm easily accessible. If you have a problem, you have a concern, I'm easy to find. Have that discussion. Do not intimidate committee members in the Agriculture Committee through social media. Am I clear? Now, I'm going to get back to my jovial self. I believe that just needs to be said, so now you know. Here's the groundwork for today. We have a lot of folks that are concerned about this issue. We're going to do our best to make everyone heard. What we will do, committee, if you have questions for proponents or opponents, we will wait till the oral presenters are done. So make a note, and we will do it at that time. In the interest of the numbers that we have, you can go no longer than 5 minutes. Our vice chair will be the timekeeper. If he raises his hand, you're up. So Representative Neely is the gatekeeper there. Probably raise your hand with 30 seconds to go, okay? Everybody understand? Okay. With that, we will open the hearing on House Bill 2063. To brief us on the bill, we invite Revisor Kyle Hamilton. Does he give 5 minutes? The more time you take, the less everybody else has, Kyle.
I will try my best, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2063 would establish the State Conservation Fund and the State Treasury. The fund would be intended by the legislature to be used exclusively for conservation programs. The bill would expressly prohibit monies transferred to and received from the fund from being used for fee simple land acquisitions by the federal or state government. Annually, $60 million would be transferred from the State General Fund to the State Conservation Fund. On July 15th of each year, the balance of the State Conservation Fund would be transferred as follows. 50% to the Working Lands Conservation Fund, 25% to the Wildlife Conservation Fund, and the remaining balance to the Kansas Outdoors Fund. Next, the bill would establish the Working Lands Conservation Fund. This fund would be administered by the Director of the Division of Conservation within the Kansas Department of Agriculture. A grant program would be established to utilize the Working Lands Conservation Fund with rules and regulations adopted by the division. Eligible entities for funding would include public entities and nonprofit organizations that promote or practice the listed conservation practices. Applications that provide an opportunity to capture matching funds from federal, private, or other non-state sources would be prioritized. On or before December 1st of each year, the division would be required to submit a report concerning the fund to the governor and the legislature. The report would need to be published on the division's website. Next, the Wildlife Conservation Fund would be established and would be administered by the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks. A grant program would be established with guidance provided by the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commission. The eligible entities, prioritization for capturing matching funds, and the reporting requirements would be the same as in the previous section. Any resulting fee simple land acquisitions would be determined under the department's current eminent domain statute. However, if you have my brief online, you'll see that I've attached a proposed amendment. I'll go over that shortly. That amendment would actually remove that language. And then lastly, the bill would establish the Kansas Outdoors Fund, which would be administered by the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks under the department's Parks Division. A grant program would be established, and the Parks Division would receive guidance from the statewide Local Recreation Advisory Board. Eligible projects would be required to promote outdoor access, environmental education, and recreation, or utilize practices established in the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. Eligible entities, prioritization, and the reporting requirements would be the same as in previous sections. The bill would go into effect upon publication in the statute book. And then lastly, the requester of the bill, Mr. Cobb, had requested that I go ahead and prepare a proposed amendment. As the bill currently reads, you have the initial state conservation fund that's created. And in that section 1, there's restrictive language that says any monies transferred to or received from that fund cannot be used for property acquisition. What this proposed amendment would do is it would add that restrictive language to the other 3 sections of the bill for the subsidiary funds. Because as written, while the funds that go from the State Conservation Fund to the subsidiary funds couldn't be used for that purpose, if the subsidiary funds received any money from, private donations, et cetera, that restriction wouldn't have applied. So I believe that's the purpose of this proposed amendment language. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any preliminary questions.
Questions from committee? Understand? All right, thank you, Kyle. Fiscal note, Heather O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aside from the $60 million transfer that Kyle spoke about that's in the bill that would occur in each fiscal year, FY 2026 and 2027, there's also some administrative fiscal note discussion. The Department of Agriculture and the Department of Wildlife and Parks both state that the requirements of the bill would increase their expenditures beginning in FY 2026. For the Department of Agriculture, it would require 3 positions totaling $259,500. The same 3 positions and the same amount for the Department of Wildlife and Parks as well. This funding would come from the Working Lands Conservation Fund and the Wildlife Conservation Fund and the Kansas Outdoor Fund that are created by the bill. The Kansas Department of Administration also indicates that the Office of Accounts and Reports would have some duties under this bill, but it would not affect their operating expenditures.
So Heather, again, what was the total?
The total for revenue is $60 million per fiscal year.
Okay.
And then the administrative costs for the 2 agencies would total Yeah, 5.8, yeah, there you go.
518,000.
259, yeah, 259, 500 times 2.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Heather? Thank you. We will get down with oral proponents, and again, 5 minutes. And Representative Neely will be the timekeeper. He will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. First up is Justin Cobb from Kansans for Conservation. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the committee, for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 2063. The Kansans for Conservation Coalition led the drafting process of this bill, and it's my pleasure to give you an overview of the coalition and its mission. Kansans for Conservation was founded in 2017 by a diverse group of stakeholders that was brought together by the need to establish dedicated funding for conservation. Now, with 41 member organizations, the coalition's membership represents Kansans from virtually every walk of life and county within the state. House Bill 2063 can truly be considered to be a collaborative effort, combining the interests of farmers, ranchers, hunters, hikers, and all Kansans who enjoy the quality of life and economic benefits brought by our natural resources. Many of the conferees today will discuss their personal experiences with conservation and the challenges and opportunities that exist. I would like to provide one brief example that demonstrates the mission of the coalition. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program, known better to many of you as EQIP, is NRCS's flagship conservation program. EQIP provides technical and financial assistance to producers to address natural resource concerns such as soil health, wildlife habitat, drought mitigation, and much more. In the 2024 funding cycle, Kansas producers submitted 1,970 applications for the EQIP program. Only 837, or 42%, were awarded. This means that over 1,000 applications requesting more than $140 million in aid were denied because of a lack of funding. This shortfall demonstrates a sentiment that's felt across Kansas. The stewardship of our natural resources are driven by the work of private landowners and local government. By themselves, they cannot tackle the many issues the state faces or capture the innumerable match opportunities from private and federal sources that many of our neighboring states outcompete us to receive. House Bill 2063 would provide much needed support in this area, which benefits all Kansans. As the revisor mentioned, we did have a drafting error in this bill, and we'd like to actually thank Kansas Livestock Association for catching our error and for the revisor for preparing this amendment. To be incredibly clear, it is the intent and the effect of that amendment that no funds in House Bill 2063 would be able to do any type of land acquisition by the state or federal government. Thank you once again for your consideration of House Bill 2063. We look forward to working with you to support the natural resource state. I'll be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. Again, committee, if you have questions, make a note. We will at the end of our oral proponents. Up next, Josh Rowe. Welcome to committee.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, members of the committee. Josh Rowe, I serve as the CEO of the Kansas Corn Growers Association, but today I'm also speaking on behalf of the Grain, Sorghum, Soybeans, and Wheat Associations, as well as the Kansas Farm Bureau. So happy to make this testimony for these ag groups there. You know, we really feel Kansas is missing out on some needed funding because we're one of only 15 states in the nation that doesn't have constitutionally protected conservation funding through there. And what we see, programs that work in other states, it's just this whole focus on working lands conservation programs. You know, I also should mention as a side, you know, I'm a 7th generation farmer up in Republican Jewel counties in the beautiful 106th district up there. And, you know, I successfully manage our land for crops, livestock, as well as, you know, waterfowl, upland birds, turkey, and deer habitat as well, both for personal use as well as working with some outfitters there that provide some, quite frankly, needed income when the ag times are down. And I've just seen firsthand how these working land programs work together. I see states, you go north 2 states in South Dakota, they've really been able to uphold like their upland game bird populations through there where we've really faltered in Kansas through there. You know, some of the funding utilized, you know, my counterparts in South Dakota corn utilize things like, it's a program called Every Acre Counts. It helps producers really get to the bottom line, what the profitability is on every acre, look at additional programs that might be available from the state and the federal government to do there. It's really intriguing programs, not so much on the working land side, such as providing incentives to control wildlife predators through that. And that's really the whole piece there. I was preparing for this testimony today. I look back, and in December of 2021 at the invitation of Chairman Rogers, I appeared before this committee on a special committee on 30 by 30 and talked about Kansas Corn Growers Association's, opposition at the time to government, widespread government acquisition of land or telling us how we can farm our land. And I'll tell you, my statement then is the same as it is now through that, and should be very telling that these organizations are up here in support of that effort through that, because we hear all too often, especially I've got a really active board member in this space. He farms in West Central Kansas and just talks about the days when he was growing up, where if it was opening pheasant season, every little hotel was full to the brim. There was just traffic everywhere. It seemed the local churches, community organizations made half of their fundraising budget for the year on that opening pheasant weekend, and that's really went down by the wayside. So we see some definite economic benefits that can just happen to the overall economy, in addition to some additional resources for these voluntary working lands coalitions. So appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of these groups, and we'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. Up next, Bill Mawson from Johnson County Parks and Rec. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here. Bill Mawson. I'm the superintendent of parks and golf courses for Johnson County Park and Recreation District. I've been with Johnson County Park and Rec since 1986, just a few years. I've been an active member of the Kansas Recreation Park Association, one of its 1,500 active members for 37 of those years. Johnson County Park and Recreation District is very proud of its parks, trails, recreation facilities, indoor facilities, outdoor facilities, because they attract people from all over the Midwest to come to our community and spend their dollars. It's big business in our community. We feel like 50% of every dollar that we spend on those programs, we get $1 back. So we feel like it's a good investment. House Bill 2063 could provide an opportunity to expand our parks and our facilities, to expand our opportunities to bring more folks into our community and improve economic development. JCPRD, or Johnson County Park and Recreation District, is on the precipice of receiving a one-time no-cost land transfer of 2,000 acres from the former Sunflower Army Ammunition Plant. Everybody knows where Panasonic is going. We're going to have 2,000 acres around the edge of that former ammunition plant that will come to us sometime in the next 2 years. The land has been neglected for the past 20 years. It's been under hardly any land management. We hope to get it, acquire it at no cost to the taxpayers, and then open it up for public use. This House Bill 2063 could help us with that in many ways. Help us preserve the prairies, get rid of the invasives, and manage the land properly, and invite the public to use it. So first time this property would be able to be used by the public since 1942 when the Army took it. So some of it's coming back to the public, which is a good thing. So House Bill 2063 is one answer. It's one answer that we can maybe take advantage of to bring some needed dollars back to the local units of government to help expand our park opportunities, recreation opportunities, etc. I sure do hope you consider supporting this bill. Currently, there's only one funding mechanism outside of local dollars, and that is the Land and Water Conservation Funds, and those are funded through the federal government down to the state government through Kansas Wildlife and Parks, and they just don't meet the need. It just doesn't meet the need. Every year there's more requests for funding than there is money available. So with that, I'd sure be glad to answer any questions you have when time is appropriate, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Up next, Glenn Walker. Mr. Walker, welcome to committee. Thanks for being here.
My name is Glenn Walker, and sitting back there is my wife and partner of about 60 years in our operation. We live 5 miles west of Brookville, Kansas, in what I call the beautiful Smoky Hills. We moved up there in 1952 when my parents took a place as a tenant farmer, and so they started with absolutely nothing. That area is largely mixed grass prairie, differentiated from the tall grass in the Flint Hills and the short grass west of us from around Hayes and on further west. Almost everything is grass right in our area. Just across the road from our house is one parcel of 20 sections without a road through it, and almost all grass. Beautiful area with sunsets you can't beat, prairie chickens, prairie sandpipers, wildflowers, plenty of wind, and limited rainfall. But it's been my home for nearly 78 years. In about 65, my folks were able to purchase their first parcel of grass while continuing to live on the Gregory Ranch, but they began to build a place of their own. Barbara and I married in 1965, about the same time. I graduated from college in 68. After a year of basic training in AIT, I took a teaching job in 69, but we continued to be involved in the ranching industry and on weekends and summers. In 1975, we bought our first actual prairie ourselves. Some people said we lived rather cheaply. I prefer to call it frugally. In 2001, I retired from public education. We moved back to our properties where we built a house looking across one of our pastures to the hills to the west. We've had a lot of people come to see us sitting on our porch when the sun set, and they say, you know, you live in a resort. And I actually feel that way. My folks were very dedicated to conservation, to maintaining and improving their property by limited grazing, rotational grazing, development of spring water. So it was easy for us to do that. One of my wishes was that our land would remain ranching land rather than be carved into small ranchettes or covered with windmills. So when the NRCS came out in about 2004 with the Grassland Reserve Program, we did some research and we put in, I think, about 1,300 acres at that time in that easement program. I think we were the second landowners in Kansas to place acreage in that program. Our land will always remain grassland, not disturbed by development. In 2008, when my father passed, Barbara and I had acquired about 3,000 acres, mainly grass, while my father and mother had about 2,500 acres. We inherited half of that, bringing us to close to 4,000 acres. Soon after that, the Kansas Livestock Association formed the Ranch Land Trust of Kansas, in which they set up an easement program, and we put more land into that easement program. Finally, why I'm here. As most of you know, our area out in central Kansas does not look like it did when the pioneers came. There were no or nearly no trees anywhere west of here, just along the rivers. It was mile after mile of prairie grass with small creeks running across the entire year. I still remember in the 1960s, the first time my dad and I were traveling across a pasture and we saw a cedar tree and we thought, that's beautiful. It's nice to have a tree growing like that. If only we had known. Today, the biggest problem we grassland owners face is the control of invasive plants, especially red cedar, longthorn locust, and hedge. They rob the natural prairie of the space to produce grass and of water, which is essential for growth. I've read an eastern red cedar 10 foot high will drink 50 gallons of water a day. I know you have driven by pastures covered with cedars that must be very short of water. Fire would likely be the best method of control, but that's difficult to get the crew necessary, and I don't want to take the chance of losing a fire with some of my neighbors not in favor of such. I spend a lot of time cutting trees, and probably 20 hours a day most of the year. And it's just expensive to do that. It takes a lot of dedication and money. We need further money. The federal government helps on burning and control of trees, but it is not enough to cover it. And so if there were a way for this money to be used in the conservation of our natural prairies, I know that it would be well used.
Wrap it up, please. Thank you. No, you can, if you got it.
I'm basically done.
Okay.
But thank you very much, and we'll be here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure that, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, I apologize, that if we let you go along, some great stories, we may be here till 7, and appropriators will not be friendly either. No, everybody's been good so far. Thank you for that. Now, John Ritchie, Ducks Unlimited. Mr. Ritchie, thanks for being here. Welcome to committee.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this important issue. My name is John Ritchie, and I am a Senior Regional Director for Ducks Unlimited and have been with the organization for 23 years. I'm here today in support of House Bill 2063 on behalf of our 15,000 plus members in the state of Kansas and 650,000 members nationwide. Ducks Unlimited is a science-based organization working to protect wetlands for waterfowl, wildlife, and people. While we are a conservation organization, our membership is made mostly of hunter and fishermen and outdoor recreationists. And hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation have been an essential part of Kansas heritage since its statehood. It is part of the state's fabric and identity. Kansas is an important stopover for birds, meaning ducks and geese, during their spring and fall migrations. Think of it as somewhat of a rest area, or when you had your kids stopping on a vacation trip to refuel and eat. This combined with the upland habits of prairie, we have provided a world-class waterfowl wildlife resource that attracts tens of thousands of bird hunters and nature enthusiasts from across the country and generates millions for the Kansas economy. Unfortunately, in Kansas, 98% of the land is privately owned. Wildlife only exists through the cooperation and participation of farmers and ranchers who host the wildlife that we all enjoy. In private partnerships, through voluntary incentive-based programs, Ducks Unlimited has worked hard, hand in hand with Kansas landowners to conserve habitat, improve working farms and ranches, and provide access for sportsmen and women. Federal programs include the Farm Bill, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. These provide resources and options for landowners to implement conservation practices which improve soil health, water quality and quantity, and provide habitat for our wildlife. There are some common themes that with the federal conservation program. One, they are popular with the landowners. We currently have numerous backlogs and waiting lists for nearly every program we work with. And two, they typically require a non-federal match. I'd like to provide a couple of examples of DUs working currently in the state, how the funding proposed in this bill would help those efforts. In the dry West, if you want waterfowl or wildlife, you need water, which is why DU works in Kansas is so water-centric. In Western Kansas, Farm Bill programs help producers restore playas, the shallow temporary wetlands that are so critical in replenishing the Ogallala aquifer. Interest in USDA programs to conserve playas are grown dramatically and is only hampered by the cost share of the producers, which could be addressed through a state fund like the one proposed in this bill. Ducks Unlimited has also been involved in water quality and recreational projects with the Kansas municipalities. all of whom would be eligible for funding under HB 2063. In Eastern Kansas, DU Work is working with the City of Wellington, KDHE, EPA, and Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks on a wetland project to treat runoff into the the Wellington Lake, and improve water quality for the city's primary water source. And more recently, DU has partnered with Michael Rhodes Wetland Park in Newton, Kansas. It's near the Newton wastewater treatment plant, featuring wetlands, walking paths, boardwalks, education signs, custom murals, wildlife viewing, and unique birding by ear elements for vision impaired visitors. House Bill 2063 could provide resources for more local communities to improve water quality and provide additional outdoor recreational opportunities. Ducks Unlimited has been a member of the Kansas for Conservation Coalition since its inception. Because the state-based conservation funding has been an important part of the habitat work across the country, just so you know, for every dollar invested by the Nebraska Environmental Trust, also known as NET, and the Great Outdoors Colorado, typically an additional 2 to 3 in additional private and federal funding have been generated. NET has critically done work for Nebraska's water quality and quantity, with projects ranging from stream restorations to irrigation improvements and restoring the Ogallala Aquifer. Great Outdoors Colorado has helped to expand hunting access on the existing state wildlife areas. These neighboring state funds have also provided a boost to local and rural economies, which most of these projects take place. In fact, it's not unusual for folks in the local cafe to ask our DU staff and contractors how much longer they're going to be in town when we're working on a conservation program. DU has supported dedicated conservation funding in many states across the country and applauds the Kansas legislature for considering this unprecedented commitment to funding critical quality and life infrastructure, investments in conservation, working lands, recreation, and outdoor education are investments in the future of Kansas. Thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to take questions when it's appropriate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Up next, Catherine Louderback. Ms. Louderback, welcome to committee.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Chairman and committee. My name is Catherine Louderback, and I'm a science teacher in the Topeka area for 13 years. In 2023, I was honored as the Teacher of the Year for my district, and next year, I will serve as the program facilitator for our district's environmental science program. From my experience, I can confidently say that grant opportunities such as those presented in House Bill 2063 have had a profound impact on my role as an educator and on my students' learning experiences. Many of the organizations represented today in this coalition have directly supported me through professional development opportunities and have deepened my knowledge and enhanced my teaching skills, particularly in conservation practices within agribusiness and wildlife management. Through these programs, I have had an invaluable opportunity to meet with industry leaders, ranchers, waterkeepers, scientists, and fellow educators across the state, strengthening the connection between conservation science and career pathways for my students. I've never encountered a more welcoming and supporting community for educators, and I'm deeply grateful for the experiences and resources these opportunities have provided. The knowledge and skills I have gained through these opportunities have profoundly impacted my classroom. My students benefit not only from the expertise I've acquired, but also from the confidence I have developed in leading them through hands-on outdoor learning experiences. Thanks to the resources and training provided by these programs, I can take my students outside and conduct fieldwork and investigations related to conservations, allowing them to truly understand and appreciate the value of our state's land, water, and wildlife. I was incredibly fortunate to participate in a free professional development made possible through a grant supported by one of the advocating groups today. This opportunity was transformative, equipping me with the skills to plan and implement a school-wide conservation-based project by engaging both students and the broader community. Within the training, my school's Green Club successfully organized a Community Day event, bringing together students, staff, parents, and community members to give back by improving the school grounds. This event not only fostered environmental responsibility, but also strengthened community engagement by providing a hands-on experience in conservation efforts. Our goal was to replace traditional grass beds with drought-resistant native plants in the front of our building, an initiative that aligns with long-term sustainability efforts. Thanks to the grant funding we received, we planted over 200 flowers in the garden beds at Washburn Rural Middle School, enhancing the local biodiversity and raising the awareness about the importance of environmental stewardship. The event gave students a direct role in improving their surroundings, from planting flowers and refilling bird feeders to cleaning up the campus. Many of the students who had never gardened before learned essential skills from the staff and community volunteers, such as properly sizing the hole for plants, spreading roots to promote healthy growth. Without the support of this grant, we would not have been able to provide such a meaningful, large-scale community service initiative. The true success became evident in the days that followed, as students and staff noticed and appreciated the positive impact of their efforts. The combination of professional development and funding empowered us to turn our vision into action, demonstrating the lasting impact of investment in education and community engagement. Outdoor learning provides a level of engagement that far surpasses traditional classroom settings. Students become more invested in the learning process, making meaningful connections between science and the natural world. Unfortunately, fewer children today are exploring nature, instead spending increasing amounts of time in front of their screens. As an educator, I am grateful for the support these grant opportunities, which enable me to create safe, hands-on experiences that reconnect students with science, nature, and conservation in a meaningful way. Thank you for your time. I'll answer questions in the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Louderback. Up next, Keith Badger, Osage County Farmer. Mr. Badger, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Keith Badger. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2063. I farm corn, soybeans, and wheat in Osage County. I am a Conservation District board member in Osage County. I've also served on 2 RAPS committees in my time down there, and those RAPS committees were in protection of Pomona Reservoir and Clinton Reservoir. So I've had a various look at conservation systems and goals. Conservation districts are what I want to talk about. The conservation districts have been in Kansas for over 80 years. Kansas, an early adopter in 1937. Each county's a district. There are district managers in most counties if they can afford. Board members are publicly elected, and probably our biggest duty is assessing the qualification of landowners for the public-private fund structure. In other words, getting funds to cost share on conservation things. One thing that we constantly see is there's always a shortage of budget to address all the applicants in our county. Roughly half go unfunded, and that's pretty tough to watch when you know you have deserving projects out there that are not going to be caught that year. In my years of board service, I've learned that conservation districts are kind of the lighthouse, the icon of agricultural conservation. Landowners bring their stuff in because they know the manager. They know this is where you go if you have problems that you want to address, natural resource concerns. The manager goes to work getting the technical expertise, contacting agencies of interest that you may have, whether it be forestry, rangeland, whatever your concern may be, and they start that process to see if you're eligible for funding these projects. The State Division of Conservation is very responsive to the districts, a good relationship I have experienced other avenues for funding and agricultural conservation, and the system that you fund, the Division of Conservation and the local conservation districts, is hands down the best. They just take good care of us. Our conservation district works closely with many of our partners in educational efforts. We go into the schools and we hold poster, limerick, speech contests. We recognize them at county meetings, see if the winners are eligible to go to the state and perhaps be recognized there too, getting our young people involved. And perhaps someday some of them will seek a career in resource conservation. We have interactive demonstrations. You saw one. It was the earth balloon out here at the Rotunda Tuesday. That was quite a structure. So it makes quite a statement. Adult education is important. New research comes along years ago. This is how you stop erosion, conserve the soil, protect the water. Today, cultural practices have changed, and we're into an era where we're using cover crops and nutrient management and a multi-species perhaps in grazing. So we're quick to bring opportunities for education and learning as we can. But we have to budget judiciously to do both, fund programs and to educate. So in summary, I'd like to make it more about my experience. My family came here in the late 1800s. My grandfather got off a train, and he carried with him a shovel to the prospective lands that he was going to buy and walked that ground and turning over sod every now and then and looking it over. Is this land going to support my family if I come here and buy? And 2 generations later, my grandfather began using the public-private cost share system to build terraces and waterways on his farm. These structures exist today. They may have been repaired, added onto, modified, but they have served through my farming career. Today, we use newer things, as I said, cover crops and nutrient management for soil health. Protect that soil from the top, keep those roots going to take care of that ecosystem of the soil. An educator once told me, a garden is grown in the soil, dirt's what you track in the house. So we have to be soil managers and truly care about what we're doing. Nutrient management, taking tests of the soil, and the 4 R's. Get the right stuff at the right time in the right place at the right amount. And all of that together protects our economic livelihood, sending cleaner water downstream, which I do have family members that serve on local water districts, and they sure appreciate that. So a dollar spent on conservation is not just to benefit the landowner. It brings economic security to our state, stable, healthy food supply, clean water to our urban and rural water districts, and preservation of our reservoirs. It's an investment that, in my eyes, lasts for generations. Thank you for the time. I respectfully ask your consideration of House Bill 2063, and I will be available to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Badger. Up next, Marshall Loftus, Kansas Chapter Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Mr. Loftus, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Chairman Rauchus, members of this committee, thank you for this opportunity to provide supporting testimony for HB 2063 on behalf of the Kansas chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. My name is Marshall Loftus, and I am the chair of the Kansas chapter. BHA is known as the sportsman's voice for our public lands, waters, and wildlife. The Kansas chapter is a volunteer-led organization and we have board members and members from all over the state. There are several reasons we support this bill. Myself and the majority of our members are not big landowners. We're just average hunters and anglers that enjoy taking our friends, family, hunting and fishing and hiking and just enjoying the outdoors. Myself and many of our members also rely on the Kansas wildlife as a source of food. I know that may be a little surprising to some, but I think if you ask one of my kids what their favorite food is, they would probably mention a bluegill or a deer or an elk or something to that effect. So Section 3 of this legislation requests that 25% of the funding go to the Wildlife Conservation Fund. We're very supportive of this aspect of the bill. It incentivizes the two primary things that we as hunters and anglers need: habitat and access. Our members know that we pride ourselves on our boots on the ground service projects that we do all over the state to both improve habitat and open up access. We've spent a lot of time cutting those beautiful cedar trees that Mr. Walker had mentioned earlier. But what we have realized is there's a lot of habitat across the state that is in need of management. There's a lot of cedar trees to be cut, and we only have so many volunteers. So we've done projects on public land with other NGOs, as well as on private land to help open up public access via the walk-in hunting program. If we want quality habitat and access to that habitat for hunting and fishing, it requires that we invest in those things. Not that long ago, access was a simple thing. You could knock on your neighbor's door, talk to somebody at church, and they might let you go hunt and fish on their property for the day. And that still is true to a degree, but demand has grown and access has become much more difficult. I'll tell you personally, I'm a transplant to Kansas. I moved here about 13 years ago for a career opportunity for myself and my wife. And what I quickly realized once I moved here, I live in Johnson County, was that without that network of, the family farm and friends, I had no place to go hunting and fishing and to take my kids hunting and fishing. So my family relies on public access here in Kansas. I'm sharing this because my story is not unique. I've spoken to a number of our members and a number of folks, especially in our urban areas, that have similar stories where they move for a career opportunity and they're not thinking about, the things that they love. The hunting and fishing kind of comes second, right? And they arrive and then they quickly realize that, holy smokes, I have no place to go hunting. So Section 2 of HB 2063 requests that half the money would go into working lands. I can tell you personally, I grew up on a cow-calf farm, and professionally I work in agriculture. So I understand many of the challenges of working lands. Each acre is a valuable asset to the bottom line of those farming and ranching businesses. It's difficult for a farmer or rancher to prioritize wildlife habitat if there's no incentive to do so. Even though our organization, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, are primarily a public lands and access organization, we recognize that we probably won't ever have access to a lot of these lands that would be affected by this working lands fund as part of HB 2063. But we also recognize that those private lands are a reservoir for the wildlife that we enjoy hunting. Just because they aren't accessible today doesn't mean they won't be on a piece of publicly accessible property tomorrow for us to hunt. We also recognize that Kansas is 98% private land, and those private lands and the ways they are managed are very important to sustaining healthy wildlife populations and having clean water. It looks like my time is up, so for those reasons and for others in our written testimony, the Kansas chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers supports HB 2063. I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Loftus. Are there others wishing to verbal as a proponent? Seeing none, We have a list of written only committee and audience. These will be posted as time allows. We have just a couple, and so by the time it gets up there, they will be there soon, and we can review those hopefully by tomorrow or sometime when they're up. I'm going to give you the names of those who also have proponent testimony written only. Andrea Perdue, Kansas Hikes. Shahira Stafford from Kansas Co-op Council. Ellen Parker, Water 1, that's Water District 1 in Johnson County. Erica DeVore, Kansas Recreation and Parks Association. Zach Pastora, Kansas Sierra Club. Dr. Sarah Diamond, State Association of Kansas Watersheds. Andrea Kelly, Executive Director of the Mulvane Recreation Foundation. David Raines, Director of Coffeyville Recreation Commission. Tyler Rafter, State Coordinator for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Justin Jameson, Ringneck Classic Incorporated. Barth Crouch, Ranchland Trust of Kansas. Laura Downey, Executive Director, Kansas Associated Conservation and Environmental Education. Jacqueline Augustine, Executive Director, Audubon of Kansas. Caitlin Stanley, Executive Director of the Kansas Land Trust. Alfonso Leva, President of the Kansas Wildlife Federation. Bevan Law, President of the Kansas Associated Conservation District. Karen Wiley, Vice President, and William Bradley, President of Farm Tender LLC. Tom Buller, Executive Director, Kansas Rural Center. Reverend Thad Holcomb, moderator for Lettuce. That's the Lawrence Ecological Team United for Sustainability. Jared McJunkin, Director of Conservation Operations for the National Wild Turkey Federation. Nick Lewandowski, Executive Director, Kansas Farmers Union. Jenny Moore, Kansas State Director, Conservation Fund. Don Bueller, Executive Director, Friends of the Caw. Sarah Hill Nelson, Bowersox Mills and Power Company. Matt Smith, Conservation Delivery Specialist, Playa Lakes Joint Venture in Wilson. Floyd Schmidt, President of the Kansas Forestry Association. David Kraft of the Kansas Grazing Lands. Erica DeVore, Executive Director, Kansas Recreation and Parks Association. Laura Lutz, Director of Government Affairs, Evergy. Katie Roby, State Director, Nature Conservancy. And Jennifer Similink, Executive Director, Kansas Soil Health Alliance. I apologize if I got your name wrong. If you wanted to pronounce correctly, you could have given oral testimony. We will continue on. Again, questions now. We don't want to limit too much, but we don't get too deep. So any committee members have questions for any of those? Representative Fairchild. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Cobb. Last year when the conservation people came into my office, the main concern that I had about the bill was the amount of funding in it. It is about 35 or 40 million. This year it's even more at 60 million. And I think there may have been some other people that expressed some concerns about the cost of the bill. When you look at our fiscal situation this year at the state level, it's worse than last year as far as we're spending 400 million more than what we're taking in. Representative Minix in the Water Committee has another water funding bill of about 25 million that does contain some conservation funding, increased funding for the conservation districts. And so in light of all that, my question is, why did you guys come back with the bill this year that spends even more money than last year's bill?
Thank you, Representative, Mr. Chair, for that question. Great question. So this is also the intent of last year's House Bill 2541 was to be at this amount or similar. The fiscal note got a little bit tied up on that one, which is why it may have appeared to be a lower amount. And so this is a simplified version of the intended funding amount for last year. And to perhaps your more important question about how this funding ask relates to the state's budget and why this type of amount. And I think very similar to the process that Representative Minix has led on water, we know that the need for natural resources could be everything. And so when we look at what number we set at this bill. We said, how much do we think we could effectively put on the ground with the infrastructure the state has in place to really have a maximum benefit for the folks who are doing the work currently. And so that's why we're at that number. But we know that the state is working through its budget concerns, and it's a conversation we're happy to have about what the right investment is. But that's why we have the bill set at what it is.
Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to wear out my welcome, but I do have a two-part question. For Mr. Mason, I guess Johnson County Parks and Recs. I'm young enough to know that the location that used to be the Sunflower Ammunition Plant. And so part one of the question is, what mitigation efforts must you perform to make the land safe for the public? And then how would House Bill 2063 facilitate your mitigation efforts?
Perfect. Thank you very much for the question. The landowner, current landowner, and the Army are responsible for mitigating all cleanup that's required on the plant. It has to be cleaned up to residential standards before it can be transferred to JCPRD. So it's been in the process for almost 20 years of cleaning it up. House bill that we're here for would help us fund, through local grants, help us fund removal of invasive plant material and help us replant prairies and turn the property over to make it more accessible for the public following the transfer after it's been cleaned.
So you get it clean.
Exactly.
When you receive it,
it's part of the real estate transaction, and it has to come to us clean.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question may be for Justin, but I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to wear out my welcome.
Too quick.
The first question is, what is the impact for potential tourism, especially in areas that may be potentially struggling on bringing in people? So what is the potential for tourism and other economic development? That's my first question. And then my next question is along the lines of tourism. For the other states that have a fund that's very similar to this, have they seen increased tourism in areas, and have they seen revitalization? And then what is the potential job growth what's the potential job growth from this? And then I have two other questions, but you can just answer whichever ones. And then what is the potential long-term impact of not investing in a fund like this? And then does this open us up to federal grants and grant matching? Thank you.
Mr. Cobb, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative, for those questions. I'm going to try to hit them as best as I can, and I'll say up front, I'm probably lacking on the data and the detail that you might desire. But I'll start with the tourism and economic development is certainly substantial. Mr. Rowe earlier mentioned some of the success that South Dakota has had, particularly with their pheasant population management. That's substantial. There are a number of rural towns in South Dakota that if you were to travel there and visit, you'd think they just make their living off pheasants. And so there is a substantial amount just in the recreation side to bring in tourism. I think Mr. Mawson also talks about the Johnson County ability to provide that quality of life and bring in that other type of recreation is certainly a substantial tourism attraction. Economic development also speaks to that as well. I'll also pick on Mr. Loftus's testimony. He's a very qualified individual, professional who would certainly consider what type of natural resource opportunities are available to whenever he chooses where to live. And so being able to provide that quality of life infrastructure makes us more appealing to candidates such as himself. And then I think the last two questions, the not investing in this type of opportunity is substantial. When Mr. Walker talks about the threat that trees pose, not just to grasslands for a habitat perspective, but also to the broader ranching aspect of Kansas. Kansas has a history, a culture, an economic foundation in the livestock business. And if we don't invest in grasslands, we quickly lose out on forage production and the ability to sustain that. I think the last portion was on federal grant opportunities. And then the one that I would highlight that's very easy for us to sense is Mr. Mawson also mentioned the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That's a federal opportunity. It's been around since 1989. And of Kansas and our 4 neighboring states, we are dead last in historical receipts of those grants. They do require some type of match, and on average to our neighboring states, we have received $102 million less. And so it's a substantial loss that we've had, and that just in a competitive aspect on the federal side.
Thank you very much. And I can say one thing. When Mr. Masson mentioned the trees, I shuddered because I recently listened to Up From Dusk, which is a KCUR podcast, which I highly recommend for anyone who loves podcasts.
Okay. Committee, we have Representative Roth and Representative Gardner, and then if you have other questions, follow up. We can write them out. We'll get them to the, I will make sure we have plenty of time for the opponents as well. So, Representative Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, because I've got a ton of questions here, but let me just wrap it up. I wondered how many organizations there were in Kansas that deal with conservation. Mr. Cobb gave me a sheet with all kinds of names of all different kinds of organizations doing conservation in Kansas. And then I got to asking the question about, well, how many dollars are being spent already in Kansas? And just a quick look on conservation, USDA 2023 announced in conservation grants $90 million for 53 different projects. So we got $90 million coming from there. Another one for regional conservation projects, $34.9 million. So is this money really coming to Kansas for conservation, or is it not? That's the just my, because there's more than that. There's millions and millions that's listed here in different organizations and how much they're putting into conservation, and they're asking for 60 million, but we got all these other millions coming in. So is there no conservation being done in Kansas?
What, if you want to handle that right quick? Mr. Cobb, make it quick, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In short, conservation is being done in Kansas, and I don't have the line items what all those grants are. Some of those are going to be Farm Bill programs, CRP, similar ones. And some of the state has been able to leverage their existing programs, so that the High Plains Aquifer RCPP is certainly a substantial amount that you've seen. So there is conservation being done, and the majority of that private conservation being done is privately funded, especially on that side. But those Farm Bill opportunities do exist and are still received by producers.
Well, it doesn't say anything about private funding here. It says USDA, which I assume is the federal government. So I don't think that's private funding when you've got over $100 million coming to. And there's one here that says 1.8 billion in Kansas. So anyway, that's enough. I mean, it's information to be thinking about.
Right, and if you have questions, just submit them to Dana. She'll get out to the right people and hope we get answers back. Representative Gardner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And for Mr. Cobb, I'll try to be very quick about this. You know, one of the tenets of this country, this state, is taxation and representation and transparency. As I read this bill, we are being asked to put this money into three different funds that are run by unelected people. And then there is a call for reports about where it went, but how am I to explain to the taxpayers that I represent where their tax money went, and if they don't like what's going on, where is their representation in that process?
Thank you, Representative, Mr. Chair. So all 3 of these grants have utilized existing advisory boards, and some which are already elected. For example, the State Conservation Commission for the Working Lands Grant Fund is elected to those positions. And so it would be, as written, it would be our goal that those existing advisory boards, which have public meetings and would be discussing these processes in a public forum, would be the touch point for transparency, so that if somebody had a concern or a question, they would be able to visit these already established groups and provide that. In addition, we would expect that those reports to the legislature would be heavily reviewed. If you're going to appropriate dollars and expect a report back, I think that report would be robust, and you'd be right to ask questions about how the dollars are spent and evaluate if it's worth a continuing investment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. All right. We're going to move on now with the opponents, and we have 5 right now on the list, so we'll get to it. Taylor Nickel, the Kansas Livestock Association. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and members of the committee. My name is Taylor Nickel here on behalf of the Kansas Livestock Association. For those of you that may not know what we do, we are a 5,700 member organization involved in the livestock industry across the state. We have cow-calf operations, which are the members I work with on a daily basis, plenty of feed yards, a few dairies, and a few swine operations as well. I'll keep it really quick. I want to give a big thank you to Mr. Cobb and Revisor Hamilton for working on an amendment that takes care of our concerns. Again, stated in my testimony, it was a believed drafting error, and so with that amendment, our concerns are taken care of. But I do want to note that KLA has policy on the books that opposes the purchase or acquisition of land by the Department of Wildlife and Parks, and so that was our main issue, was with Section 3G of the bill. That still kind of left that in there. That was in the bill last year. With Kyle's amendment, or just by striking that line, we would become neutral on the bill, and I'll leave it at that in the interest of time. So if you take care of our concerns, we'll step out of the way. Thank you.
Up next, Desiree Patera. I believe I hold close. Sorry, I had my mic on. So if I got your name wrong, you can, but Desiree Patera will do that. So welcome to committee.
Thank you for having me. In my written testimony, I did address the issue of the administration costs. And I questioned the dollar amount that was brought up here. And I would like more information on that. When you look at that dollar amount, I think it was $259,000 and plus, what was it, almost $500,000?
518.
Okay.
Total.
Well, with the 259, we have 105 counties in Kansas. How is that going to cover the administration cost? Like I said, I don't know how it was calculated, how those numbers were derived, but I think we all need to be able to see that. I don't support this bill at all. I do not believe that the state needs to spend $60 million more. Property taxpayers are broke. And I think every one of you understand that. We can't afford anymore. We are being taxed off of our properties. And is this truly needed? I really don't think it is. We need bridges. We need our health care fixed. We need so many things fixed. Right now, at this time, $60 million to something that is unneeded, I just don't think that it's justified. Now, the Wildlife and Parks, last year in their budgeting, they presented something that I was kind of shocked at. They said that they wanted to take road funds for unneeded Flint Hills Trail. And I'm like, road funds, here's something that's needed again, being taken away from us for something that is not necessary. Sure, it may enhance the quality of life, but right now, our tax dollars need to go what we need, not what we want. So anyway, on that, let me see. And that's the other thing. When Representative Gardner was speaking, accountability for our tax dollars. I want to know where these tax dollars are being spent. When I look at this bill, I just see it talking generalities of this is what we want to do, but I want to see it concrete. I want to know exactly where did that $1 million go? What did it do? We are never told that. And that's a good reason why I don't support any of these type of bills. Myself, I think a bill like this needs to go through the Kansas DOGE. I see that that has just been set up. Any bill that is just looking for funds without any specific concrete something coming out of it, I think it needs to be analyzed by the DOG. You know, government efficiency, we need it. Taxpayers can't afford the taxes anymore. Our farmers and ranchers, they take very good care of the property. We don't have to have someone else come in there and tell us how we have to live. And that's what my husband said. He said, how would any one of you like to have someone come in on your property and tell you how you have to live. It's not right. We need government out of our lives. We don't need government expanding. We need it. We need it to serve us. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
All right, Ms. Patera, thanks for being here. Up next, Marcus Rogie, on behalf of Tracy Barton, not being able to be here, so pinch hitting. So, Commissioner, thanks for being here, and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'll go ahead and Mr. Neely. Just gonna look. Okay, right there. Okay, good. So I'm representing KNRC, and Tracy Barton asked me to address the board here because she had some medical issues and couldn't come today. So I'll read her statement verbatim as quickly as I can here. So my name is Tracy Barton, the current Acting Executive Director of Kansas Natural Resource Coalition, KNRC. KNRC functions as an instrumentality of the Kansas Boards of County Commissioners, and our membership currently stands at 32 member counties, and I was informed today also that is growing. While HB 2063 appears to have honorable conservation-related goals, KNRC is opposed to the bill. The shifting definition and purpose of conservation since the Executive Order 14008, also known as the 30 by 30 order, has been detrimental to farmers and ranchers and, in essence, our rural counties. Additionally, there has been a lack of transparency to taxpayers concerning matching funds being offered, which only benefits non-government agencies. KNRC doesn't see the need for substantial tax resources to be directed into conservation measures, which have shifted their focus from encouraging good stewardship practices that improve agriculture production as directed by the Farm Bill and Food Safety Act of 1985 to the purpose outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, H.R. 5376, which prioritizes mitigating climate change, limiting livestock emissions, enhancing biodiversity, and controlling agriculture production. Specifically, this bill outlines, quote, long-term land protection from conversion or loss of habitat, biodiversity, sustainable and regenerative timber management, and ecological restoration, unquote. The shift in purpose began when Biden issued the Executive Order 14008, which outlined plans to, quote unquote, conserve 30% of U.S. lands and waters by the year 2030. While the order has recently been rescinded by the Trump administration, conservation programs had already adapted the new conservation purpose outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which places farmers and ranchers and, in essence, our rural counties at a significant disadvantage, all in the name of climate change. Another reason KNRC does not support HB 2063 is that the bill is lacking transparency to taxpayers. Specifically, HB 2063 states under Section 2G, applications providing an opportunity to capture federal, private, or other non-state matching monies through a state or local match shall be prioritized. Matching monies shall include cash contributions, non-cash contributions, including land value donations, and in-kind contributions, unquote. This bill prioritizes the purchase of or donation of and matching federal grants for conservation easements. That is why under Section 2, subparagraph D, quote, nonprofit entities shall be eligible to receive funding from the grant program, unquote. Nonprofit governmental organizations, NGOs, or land trusts are supporting this legislation because they will be one of the main entities that are benefiting from the passage of the legislation. They will receive large grants to purchase private property or place as many conservation easements as possible on private lands. Okay, I'll try to wrap it up. Okay, we'll just skip down. Proponents of HB 2063 see these federal dollars as an opportunity to advance conservation in the state of Kansas, but what they will be accomplishing is the goal of the former administration to lock up as much private property as possible through federal matching funds. I appreciate your time. I skipped some of this, and thank you.
Thank you. That's fine.
Okay.
We have it in our file, so we can read it. So thank you very much.
Super. Thank you.
Up next, Angel Cushing. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Representative Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to come. I wanted to show you this book here. This was obtained by a friend of mine who attended a meeting at a state facility talking about conservation and promoting conservation easements. The main theme of that meeting was to get as many conservation easements as possible and augment them later. So I came early today and I went to most of your offices and I left a copy of the conservation easement example that was in the book that they handed out at that meeting. I want you to take a look at it and see. If you didn't get one, let me know and I will drop one by. What I need you to know most about conservation easements is they are purchasing access to property for pennies on the dollar. Once that is obtained, once that document is there, it is now an asset. That asset can be sold to another company unless it's in the contract that says that it cannot. It can be bought by another company. Most importantly, you can go to the bank and you can mortgage it to get money for your company or your nonprofit. So at a time when most of families here in Kansas are having a really hard time finding eggs and making their grocery prices, and I'm going to put my own grandchildren in this because they are type 1 diabetics. If it were not for the meat in my freezer, they would not have any. And the most important thing about that meat is they don't require any insulin bolus for meat because it digests so slowly that they don't need it. Meat will determine whether or not they live to be 50 or whether or not they live to be 90. So I think financially, I would much rather see that money go towards helping families who are struggling, who are having a hard time paying for groceries, having a hard time paying their rent, than to help nonprofits gain the assets that they need to make more money. I'll stand for questions at the given time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Beth Salmons. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing me. You have my written testimony. I'm just going to kind of break this bill down to let you know the problems I have with it. For one thing, these nonprofits should be self-sustaining. Why are they dependent upon Kansas tax dollars, our valuable tax dollars? We've got roads and bridges that are falling apart. I think it's wonderful what you want to do for the farmers and ranchers. They're the backbone of Kansas. We've got to take care of our farmers and ranchers if we want our economy to thrive. But to have this open to any nonprofit that wants to come and apply for our tax dollars it's not right, because these are run by people that are when they break down the funds for wildlife and for parks, the outdoor sections. Only half of this money is going toward working lands. The rest of it's going for the nonprofits and to build up wildlife and parks who have their own funding to begin with. They also have income coming in from park permits, fees, and hunting fees, hunting licenses. And they do very well. I know for a fact, at the end of the fiscal year, they're told to use it or lose it on this money. I'll just go ahead and disclose it. My husband's retired from Wildlife and Parks. He managed the Tuttle Creek Wildlife Area. And at the end of the fiscal year, they were telling, buy a new truck, buy a new trailer, buy a tractor. Because if they don't spend that money, they're not going to get it for the next fiscal year. Because it will be sitting there and the legislature will say, well, you don't need that much money. And so he would do that. So I think until we start getting some control on situations like that, and the people that are going to be dispersing these are appointed by the governor. We don't know who that governor is going to be. We don't know what agenda they're going to have. I just don't understand where we need someone dispersing these tax dollars who has not been elected by the people. Even like he said, the boards. The boards may be elected, but I've never seen one on a ballot. So who are they elected by? Not the people, but by the boards that support the organizations. So where does that money go? They also get to make up their own rules and regulations on how that money is going to be spent, where that money is going to be spent. Okay, it's pretty much the same. I think that's pretty much it. I'm just going to come back down here. I'm looking at why can't we just have a bill for the working lands funds and let that go toward the true agricultural aspect of Kansas and our economy, but requiring every citizen in Kansas to contribute their tax dollars to a nonprofit that they don't get to vote for is kind of wrong. I mean, you might not support these nonprofits, but yet you're paying for them. The farmers and ranchers on conservation, our farmers and ranchers are our original conservationists. When they got this land, it was wild and woolly, and they built it to what it is today. We don't need nonprofits managing our farm ground, our ranch lands. So I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Salmons. Thank you.
I'll stand for questions.
Okay. As we go to questions right quick, Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know exactly who this is directed towards. It could be directed towards a proponent or an opponent. I sit on a couple of nonprofit boards, and so sometimes we get government grants, and we generally are used as like a pass-through or just a fiduciary or a fiscal agent. Can someone kind of explain to me how the nonprofit, what role it plays in this particular bill?
Well, that may be a follow-up question because probably a proponent will talk on that. We're doing opponent. We're kind of in our opponent mindset right now. So if you would follow up and we can get that to somebody, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for proponent, Representative opponents, Representative Blex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the members for their presentation. Marcus Rogie, I'd like for you to answer a question, if you would, please. I know you're a stand-in. That's always a tough deal. Can you tell me the Kansas Natural Resource Coalition, how they're funded? Are they funded by tax dollars?
Yes, they're boards of county commissioners, and those county commissions fund the organization through a membership.
Okay, thank you. And you said, I believe, was it 32 members that you have now?
Currently 32. I believe there will be several more I've heard. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Other questions for opponents? Representative, okay. All right. Don't tease me. Okay. We'll think for just a moment. We do have several opponent written only. And like I say, these will be uploaded soon, including Mr. Rogie there. He has, as a Haskell County Commissioner, Debbie Detmer from Shawnee, Carolyn Sims. She's from Republic. I know where she's from. Matt Steele with the Kansas Cattlemen Association. Dale Inyart, Kingman. Oops. Okay. Mary Powell. Viola Heskett. Patricia D. Damos. Courtney Crawford. Shad Sullivan, RCAF USA. Andre Rexford, he's a Kansas citizen. Any other, but anyone wishing to testify as the opponent to House Bill 2063? As my nose starts to run, and my cover Kleenex.
I have a question. You got a minute?
I have about a minute, so tell me who you are and what your deal is.
I'm Randy Petra. I'm from Junction City, Kansas. We bought some property down here about 10 years ago. It was in the walk-in hunting program. We was working on a house. Hunters come in there, was shooting right around us. I went politely and told him, no, stay away from us. He said, I don't have to. This is in the walk-in program. I have every right to be here. So I called the game warden, and he come within about an hour. And you know what he told me? I had no rights on my property. I said, okay, take your signs down. It's no longer going to be in the walk-in program. I said, I let people hunt my property, but they're going to come and ask me. I bought that property, and I should have some right. Not somebody to tell me no. That's all I've said.
That's fine. Hold on just a second. Do you have his name for the record? I want to make sure.
Randy Petra.
Petra?
Right.
Okay. There is somebody here, I believe, from Wildlife and Parks. So if you would, they'll seek out you right quick, because I'm trying to figure out, it was in the wildlife, the walk-in.
In the walk-in hunting program.
Okay, because we'll have an explanation, and that may, but thank you for including that. Okay. Okay, anything else, Representative Minix?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I was mentioned by name once here today, I want everyone in the audience to know that a lot of the good work that we're doing on water conservation and what we're trying to do on policy here in the state of Kansas, I'm not directly responsible for. That's actually the House Water Committee. We've got some people on that committee who are working very hard to improve our situation for the future. And I just wanted I wanted that on the record and everybody to know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have nobody here to speak neutral to the bill. Going once, going twice? Okay. With that, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2063. 501. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your decorum. And we will not meet committee tomorrow, but we will meet on Monday. With that, we are adjourned.